Check, 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 check. Live on Melodics HQ. Good to be here. Drum DMC. I see you. I see you first. I'm just gonna play a bit for a minute. What you see here is my my regular rig pretty much. It's what I've toured live with for a long time. And usually actually in the studio, like at home, I wouldn't usually set everything up because I'm so often getting on and off a plane. But with things as they are, I was like, well, my gear's not going anywhere, so I might as well rig up everything at home. And it's been great just to have this setting at my fingertips whenever I want it. Before I do begin, I want to give a big, what's the word? Condolences and love. And I mean, there's been a lot of loss and a lot of pain through this whole period. I just heard that Ty, MC and friend from the UK, just passed away. So I just want to send love and best wishes and condolences to Ty's family and loved ones. I just can't imagine that. He really contributed so much to hip hop in the UK and moving that forward. So yeah, rest in peace, Ty. So let me get into this here. I'm gonna just mess around for a minute and see what happens, and then I wanted to talk mostly about some kind of some keyboard approaches, and maybe people in the chat, if there's something you want to know in particular, just shout out. But yeah, let's just see what happens. A little vibe, a little vibe. So let's see what's going on here. Um, oh, senior positive, I appreciate that, man. I mean, we're all so valued in this planet, and our contributions are so important. And I appreciate that sentiment. Um, Yo, okay, we're back. So I apologize about that. I had to fossick around, find a few bits and pieces. No, my internet went mad. The upload speed went to like dial-up, so it's all fixed now. Um, let's get in a vibe again. I mean, it's hard to just do a quick reset. So let me vibe out for a minute, and then we can start chatting. All right. It is because flux capacitor. That feels better. All right. Now we're good to go. Okay. So, where is the hidden looping pedal? Right? The touchscreen on the keyboard is looping when I think. You guys got this, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to get too much into the gear, but I know everyone's a gearhead. And I feel like one thing I can really contribute while I am with you here is some basic keyboard approaches to kind of strengthen you in that way. So, just very briefly with the gear. Yes, so I'm looping the main keyboard here. This main keyboard, which is piano and Rhodes ostensibly, I'm looping that on touchable iOS on the iPad, which is right here, which I'm also using for like a chaos pad kind of XY filter tempo, basically so I'm not on the computer as much as I can be off the computer. All the MIDI is being looped obviously in Machina, and I also have the chaos pads here which I can sample and loop on as well. So there's a few different ways to approach it. So this little keyboard up here is mainly running Artillery plugin on Ableton, some global filters and LFOs. And yeah, I mean, I think most of you are pretty familiar with gear, so that part of it you shouldn't be too confusing. I did mention earlier there is a video on reverb.com where I break down the whole rig and the routing and stuff using an analog keyboard here, well, at least analog audio feed. It was a Nord Electro, I think. So yeah, that's always fun. So let's get into some stuff here. Like I feel like I said, the keyboard approach is one thing I can probably help with a lot. And like that little jam that just happened just now. Let's bring this camera down a bit. Hey, nice. So I put my mic back on the stand. Yeah, so that was cool because it was just like, you know, I just starting to look around the harmony and just playing with chords and then settling on this. What was it? It was like, I think that was it. Which for the chord heads out there is like a B flat sus to a minor to a F minor 9 to a E minor 7 to a E flat major 7. So I know for a lot of people who wear maybe finger drumming as your entry point into live production. And maybe keys might not be as strong. That that alone is like a lot. So I wanted to look really at something very simple today, which is the use of the minor pentatonic scale to build melody and harmony and structure. So this is a pretty important fundamental as far as producing music, making your own music, and having tools to explore that. I think oftentimes there's a temptation with, especially with synths and stuff, to, we get into the vibe of the sound, and then sometimes the musicality might not be as considered. So I want to use piano sound for this too, so you can just really hear what's happening, and obviously, any sound would apply. Can I listen to music without overanalyzing it? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I can't help but break it down at the same time. But I can definitely enjoy some music. No question about that. So let's look at this for a second. So I want to work in the key of C. Keep it super simple. So the C, there's two pentatonic scales, the major and the minor. The major and the minor. I'm going to talk mostly about the minor today, but they're interchangeable in the context of working with whatever you're doing musically. So if we're looking at a let's make a little groove up actually. Let's look at C minor, that's our root chord, and F minor. That's the 4 chord of the scale. So, and if that is foreign to you, then I would really, really recommend looking at a YouTube video maybe of, you could look up diatonic triads, and that'll teach you this basic relationship between notes and scales, which gives you knowledge to make music. It's kind of like, I mentioned this earlier with painting or sketching, but with painting, it's like if you don't have green paint, but you know how to make it, you know that the blue and the yellow makes the green, then you're in a much better position to be able to paint some grass or trees than the guy who has blue paint and yellow paint and doesn't know how to do that. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. These are little bits of knowledge which can really empower your whole process of creating and making music. So C minor, F minor. So I'm going to go kind of just speed through the basics here. We can extend that by the 7th, the C minor 7, F minor 7. We can invert those. Those are all C minor 7. These are all F minor 7. And then, in most contexts, if this is a C chord, the bass synth or the bass player, whoever it might be, is going to play the root note, the C in the bass. So it's kind of redundant to have it here. So there's a really cool little trick with 7th chords where this is the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th, where you switch 9 for 1. So the 9th is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, octave 9th. So this is the 9th here. So I'm going to substitute the 1 with the 9. And suddenly we have like a lusher, jazzier kind of sound. That can be inverted, of course. Same with the F. Instead of the 1 there, I'm going to put the 9 for the 1. So already you've got all this color and texture out of okay, so then we've got a basic context there for some harmony. So let's just lay something down here. Let's okay. So then we got a loop of that piano, right? Going C minor to F minor. And what I just showed you with the chord inversion, the chord substitutions, the 9th for the 1, that's all I'm doing there. I'm just kind of following the top of the chord, the top melody of the chord note down. So listening to that already, so I'm starting on the 9th. So apart from starting on the 9th, which is relevant because we've put it in that first chord, the melody I'm playing with those chords is following that minor pentatonic scale. If you look at it, next time round you'll see it. Starting on the 9th, then pentatonic. So that's not, that wasn't like me thinking, I'm going to use the minor pentatonic scale going down. It's just the natural way melody lands in our ear. The pentatonics of the fundamentals of melody and consequently harmony in our species. They change a little bit when you go to different places. Like you go to Japan, there might be one like that might be the scale instead of, or it might be, and that's what gives their music like Japanese music, Ethiopian music, that whole sound. But, in a Western context, the minor and major pentatonics are the basics. So now we've got that loop, right? Let's just build it up a little bit, get a bit of rhythm in there so we can play around. Okay, there's a bit of rhythm in there. Let's look at the bass. So the bass I want to look at again, like, you know, we're talking about these two chords, C minor and F minor. So obviously C and F are the root tones of the chords, right? So I want to looking at how the bass line can be constructed using the pentatonic scale. So I'm not thinking of it as a scale so much, just as like it's the sounds to pull from, the palette, so to speak. So, and before I do the before I continue, actually, I want to say there's nothing wrong with a one-note B line. Like, that's some of the rudest shit sometimes, and it works. This is about just having, you know, more options and tools to expand your ideas. So I'm just going to play around with the bass sound and this these two chords. Then I've got that bass line there. Is just using those notes of the minor pentatonic, but also with an awareness that in the second bar we're going to an F chord. So I'm not changing the pentatonic scale. I'm just knowing that F is the kind of the root center we're targeting for. Or then I could do a more diatonic bass line, like there's the scale which goes with this. It gives me more notes, including that ninth. And then the sixth, also the flat sixth, they sound cool. It's like, you know how sometimes you might hear notes where you think, oh, that sounds really cool, or chords. There are reasons behind why it sounds cool and why you like it. So you learn what you like and apply the knowledge, and then it's always accessible to you. So let's do a B line with maybe more passing tones, just kind of get outside that pentatonic a bit, but still in that sound. So the bass line now is still very much based around the pentatonic. There's those target notes, the C and the F for the two chords. But I'm also looking at the things like the E natural as a passing tone. You hear that on the Rhodes there? You get this kind of movement approaching the F. And then aside from that, the bass line's kind of just bouncing around the minor pentatonic. Let's just add another little keyboard part to get a vibe. Alright, a little more vibe there. Now say I want to look at this, I want to get some kind of melodic structure in here. I'm a really firm believer in when you want to write a melody that if you don't have an immediate relationship between an instrument and your ear, then sing the melody and then work out the notes. You know, you're never going to sing a whack melody. But it's also nice to know what the notes are that are kind of fundamental to your situation. And like we're saying in this case, it's the C minor pentatonic. So let's look at that for a second. putting something on top of this. So that allows me just to like, you know, jam away and just enjoy the vibe. I think a big part of this process, why we make music, is because we enjoy it, right? So more toys. The scale is a whole new toy for some people. And then maybe I want to construct some like a kind of a hook vibe. Again, it's a great starting point for that, to get a part as opposed to just jamming, like finding something fundamental which can work with the track. So now we got that little popcorn synth vibe, right? Just sitting on the minor pentatonic. Give me a little 80s vibe. Let's get a little Rhodes in there. Again, I'm going to pretty strict just using the minor pentatonic. So now, now we've basically constructed enough material for a groove that we can start to make decisions with. And I love this comment. Pitch it down about an octave and we'll have a great vaporwave track here. That's the vibe where, like, I can bounce this and then just start messing around with this audio and do anything with it, right? So that's obviously, all the tools are in the box for that. I'd love for some of you to come away with some tools where it's gonna be like, okay, I can create something with this. So part of it is obviously the dexterity as well. It's like if you don't know what the notes are or where the notes are, it can be super challenging. So what I would recommend, there we go, is approaching this pretty academically, in the same way as you would with, like, finger drumming, anything else. And the lessons are great, but it's also nice when you can have a tool where you can just do it. So, for example, with these pentatonic scales, I'd recommend just working the scale and doing it in different divisions of rhythm. So, in fact, let's put those drums back on, get rid of the music. Okay, so say if we're using these drums as kind of like a metronome, the C minor pentatonic, if I'm going to do it first in quarter notes, and just getting comfortable with the shape and how it feels and what it sounds like, right? Eighth notes. Triplets. Sixteenths. And so you have those different rhythms like under your fingers as far as how they feel and how they sound, and then you can start to, mix them up. This is a fairly academic way to approach it, but I look at it like the warm-up exercises, it's getting your muscles in order. And it's not necessarily the most musical way to play it. I'm going to play it very much as a scale. But you'll hear, I won't be able to help myself sometimes to switch the shape around a little bit or something. So you're getting a tool where you can just move around the keyboard pretty freely, right? You want to add one note to that? Let's make it the blues scale. So that would be the sharp 11, the flat 5. You hear the sound all the time in so much music. If we add that to the pentatonic scale, that one note gives you that twang to it, right? And then if we allow ourselves some passing notes, for example, we were talking before about the E flat, E, F in the bass, and then we've got the ninth, right, as well. We have a whole palette of different notes here. We've got all of those. We've got that kind of same approach with the F up the top. And then I love the sound of the sixth. And then, of course, the flat six is there too. It takes us nicely to the F minor. So then we have, the only note I've missed out is the flat 9, which can sound kind of cool too. So my general premise is that any note can fit if you know what the note is, what the context is, what it sounds like, and where it can resolve to. So if I just play around with this a little bit, basically focusing on the minor pentatonic, but can't quite intentionally putting in some of those other colors. Let's just see how many options we have here. Okay, so we've got C minor, right? F minor. So there I'm playing around with the notes we've been talking about based on the shapes that the foundation is, which is this minor pentatonic. There was one point where I went kind of out on it because I just heard it like that, which is, suffice to say, any notes can work. It's the intention with them. And two of my favorite musicians with that are Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis. Miles would just hit one note. He might sit on that sixth and just change your life. Just one note. I mean, check out this note. The sixth. This note here. Just that. It's a whole other color, right? And Herbie was great at that too. Like, the two of them, and many other musicians, but for me, those two in particular, they really had this thing where every note had intention and conviction behind it, and so every note sounded right. Like there were no wrong notes. So if we go back to those chords we had, this whole time it's just been chord 1, chord 4, C minor, F minor. You know, if we want to start to get some stuff in between, there's some really obvious places to go which sound great, and then there are some not so obvious places to go which also sound great. To me, there's no wrong place to go. It's just a matter of how you make it work. So if we have the C chord going to the F chord, then the logical chord before the F chord will be its dominant fifth, which is C. And I know we just came from C, but we're talking about a different kind of C. It's a C dominant chord. So if that kind of language, if that jargon is a bit confusing, then again, I'd recommend checking out a YouTube of diatonic triads and diatonic seventh chords, sorry. And then that'll all make sense. So briefly speaking, if we're looking at seventh chords in C major, each chord, if we just extend the scale, has a different function. This is a major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7 flat 5. And so this dominant 7 chord, in this case G7, wants to go back home to C. Right? So we're in a minor key, which is really fun with these dominant chords because you can put a lot of tension in them. So if I want to go to C7, regular C7, might be like this. And it gives you that little lift before you go to the F minor, right? Instead of going C minor, F minor, we're going C minor, C7, F minor. It just gives you that little bit of lift, right? So then we can take that a whole step further with a dominant chord and alter it a whole lot. So without going into that, because there's a lot of that information online if you want to find out about dominant voicings, the C7, when you're resolving to a minor chord, the more alterations the better because it has kind of notes in common. So this C7 is now a sharp 9, the D becomes E flat, has a 7th, it has a flat 6, flat 13. This is great because these two notes especially are very fundamental to the F minor 7 where we're going to. So we get the C minor 7, C7 altered to the F minor. Going back to the C minor, we can precede that with the same thing. The fifth is C minor, the C is G, so G7. I'm going to make that super altered again. So then we get 4 chords out of our 2. Originally we had okay, that's what we have originally. Now we add in those extra dominant chords. We have a whole lot more movement there, right? And of course we have options for inversions and voicings, which I don't want to get too heavy into, but they're mathematical formulas which are not very difficult to learn, and if you like the sound of them, they're great to really apply. So if we look at those chords with the passing chords, and let's see what kind of movement we can get with the groove. Alright, so C minor, the F minor, right? That was the C7 altered. Now let's try with the G7 altered. Back to the C. And we get this movement, right? Maybe I don't want to do that every time, I don't know. So maybe I want to put it in sometimes. Let's see what happens. so then, using the kind of ideas we've already talked about, I can then, as an improvising context or to build melody, I can look at that minor pentatonic scale again, but I want to also take into consideration those other harmonies that are happening, and maybe they can help shape my melody a bit. For example, in the minor pentatonic and in C minor, the B natural is very foreign. This note. It has this kind of not really fittingness to it. But if we use that progression, C minor, the F minor, right? And to get back to the original C minor, I'm using a G7 chord. Fundamental to G7 is its third, this B natural. So then you get a harmonic setting, like a cushion, to support a melodic possibility. You hear it there? And so you get this kind of movement through the harmony which supports the melody and vice versa. So let me just have a little play around with these extra chords in there and to see what kind of vibes are possible. And so now, just using those tools, I'm able just to move around, pretty comfortably, and it starts to be fun. Like I got to this point just now where sorry, catching up on questions. Actually, here's a good. What I was about to say is a good answer. So I don't know if anyone heard it just then, but I was playing that progression, and we're really set in the sound, right? C minor, F minor, 9. And then as I was improvising, just right ahead of the moment where the F chord hit, in my head I heard like the destination I wanted to get to on the F was an F major 7 chord, even though it's an F minor chord in the groove. So you get this whole different timbral color change, right, from putting the major in there, and I know what that's going to sound like before I hit it. So when I was improvising and I put it in there, it was like I knew it would give me that kind of lift I wanted. And it is important, I think, to have some connection where you don't need the instrument to just to tell you that your idea is good, so you hear it in your head in a way. But that takes time, and it takes practice too. It's like, if you know the pentatonic scale backwards and inside out, the minor pentatonic in this case, and you listen to a record and you hear someone play that note, you'd be like, it's a 6. So then if you're creating music and you're like, I want that sound, I want that 6, it becomes knowledge, and that knowledge becomes part of your toolkit, right? So then let's go back to this and just kind of apply the same kind of melodic freewheeling idea to a different sound, and just kind of build the palette a little further. So now we got that little melodic vibe. I'm not happy with the bass line anymore because the bass line was written around these two chords, but now there's more movement happening there that maybe I want to switch that up a little bit. Let's see. There's a whole vibe there for me. So in my production process, if I jammed out that idea and I was like, I want to use that, then I'd bounce all the parts down in Ableton and just start getting busy with it as audio, and maybe overdubbing other parts as I hear it in a production. Let me just check in. Am I missing any questions right there? Yeah, I mean, I didn't fully answer Curry Austin's question. I didn't fully answer that. Yes, my fingers do know where to go somewhat. I mean, that's the muscle memory. It's the same joint if you're playing basketball or you're boxing or you're drawing or whatever it might be. You're going to retain muscle memory, right? So practice is part of that. You want to practice the mechanics, but you want to also be practicing them in a context which they're going to be used. So if you only practiced your scales up and down, two hands, and could play them perfectly, that doesn't mean you're applying them in a musical sense, right? But knowing them is half the battle. So then you have the freedom to apply them and get musical with them. How do you structure practice sessions to support the goal of getting to that level? Let me read this out. I mean, you all can see in the chat, but I hear so much music in my mind, and even though I find it fast, once I start playing around, I don't just instantly know where it goes, though I've been able to learn some intervals and chords by heart. All this time I've been given lessons. No one ever taught me how to structure my own practice discipline, if that makes sense. That makes total sense. I love it. I mean, you talk about knowing, like, if I teach you a few chords, then that doesn't necessarily teach you the relationship between them, right? And the context where they make sense with each other. They just become sounds. I might as well just give you 3, wave files of samples, like 1, 2, 3. And then you chop them and make your beat. If I just show you how to play those 3 chords, that's kind of all I'm doing. So I think developing an understanding of harmonic context, which again starts with the diatonic triads. I mean, I kind of keep banging on about that, but it's very easy knowledge to find online. If you look up diatonic triads and diatonic 7th chords, that's going to teach you so much. I mean, these are the chords which belong in a family. And in the case of what we just did, that's that knowledge. It's knowing that, we're chord 1, C minor, chord 2, F minor, and those passing chords using the 5 dominants. I mean, I know that if I wanted to suspend tension at the end of that progression and make it sound kind of weird but spooky and give me another round to get back to the actual C chord, I could use the flat 9 chord. So, for example, which is the D flat, which has, you know, seemingly no relationship to C, but that would sound like this. So you hear that in the middle, it kind of changed the whole color of it. And the D flat as a root note in the key of C, it does make total sense because we have a thing called a tritone. And again, these are great. If you don't know the terms, these are all great to look up and understand. The tritone is exactly half the distance between two notes, between an octave, sorry. So that would be here. It's the F sharp. So F sharp is the tritone of C. C is the tritone of F sharp. It's interchangeable. So the tritone is a really interesting note because it performs the same kind of function as the 5 chord, and it's kind of interchangeable to a point. So all I did then using the D flat chord was I was using the tritone substitution of the 5 chord, the G going back to C, and I took some liberty with it. I made it like a major 7 sharp 11. So you get the sound. Right, so it's a whole different kind of resolution. And it's like this is an infinite kind of well or black hole of knowledge. Like harmony is an incredible tool, and if you checked out someone like Jacob Collier, like he's a harmonic beast, like what he does with harmony, but he talks about polyharmony in a way where you take, like, say you take a C major chord, but you put a C major 7, but you put a D major 7 on top of that. And then he's like, oh, well, why don't I put an E major 7 on top of that? And that becomes the harmony, you know? So there's no kind of limit to what's possible, and it's mathematical, which means it's true. Like there's no subjectivity about it. It's like it's very factual based. The subjectivity is what you like, you know, and so whatever you might like might be the vibe. Senior Positive, did I try to use Touche like a 3D mod wheel? I haven't seen that one. Unless it's kind of like like there's a wooden thing you kind of push, I think. Might be. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to do it and so many tools. No wrong way. What up, Sam? I see you in the chat. And so anyway, hopefully that's given some idea around the possible structure of the chords. And then, you know, if I wanted to take that further, if I was developing a whole joint and I wanted to change the harmonic feeling, maybe going to like a bridge or a chorus, or maybe that was the chorus and I want to go to a verse, I'm not sure what it might be. But then that's a really fun thing for me too. It's like finding the next piece of the Tetris game which kind of fits in and slots just in the right place. You know, harmony does that, and I mean it does it in music where you don't even think it's there. Like, you know, a lot of early hip hop or sample based, and it might be like the Bomb Squad's early Public Enemy stuff, and it's all super collage, you know, dirty samples. You know, that creates a harmony. And so, you know, this is not strictly about the piano or the guitar. It's a real fundamental to music, which I think is often overlooked, where rhythm is so immediately accessible, and melody is kind of one note lines usually, so that has an accessibility, but harmony gets this density to it, so it can be kind of overwhelming. But if I was going to look at that, so that progression, and kind of brainstorm briefly, where could that go from here? And this would happen oftentimes. I'd be in a keyboard session for someone, and we get a dope section going, and they're like, yeah, now I want to change. And so finding the change is often the challenge. And sometimes a kind of an abrupt change can be great, but also there's something about the musically the change that makes sense, sometimes. So we're here, right? C minor and F minor. A, so that's going to the flat 6 major 7, the A flat major 7. Let's look at that again. That kind of lifts to a whole new place, doesn't it? In my mind, that's immediately has potential, if it was a song structure, to go to a bridge. Maybe I want it to be a little less kind of pretty. No, that's not going to work, is it? I mean, we're in a pretty pretty territory anyway. Hey, that's more abrupt too. So then, if we were going before we went to the A flat, but what if we went to the A minor? That's a different feeling, right, than this one. Going to the D flat. So a jump like that, I went to E major. That's kind of a long way to go from the key center. And it's hard to get there. But if you're like, no, that's the sound I want, then there are ways to get there. It's even E minor. That has a sound, right? Because I have this theory that these sounds which aren't traditionally correct sound great because we're so used to chopping samples. But if I want to get this E minor smoother, that's one way. That's approaching from the 5, but then maybe, which is the B in this case, like a B7. But the tritone of B is F, right? Which is already part of my progression. So let me try and use the F to get to the E. So I'm kind of just chilling on the F. That works a lot better. Now I'm in a whole new key, which I couldn't have got to otherwise. Another way I like to approach this kind of thing, maybe not in this tempo necessarily, but if I had that kind of progression, then I might want to just hang out on the first chord. That could be a whole section. Now I'm just kind of elongating the whole thing, so we've got multiple bars per joint. I'm not missing anything. We got any questions out there in chat land? I think I'm gonna just try and throw something together and see what happens, and we'll see if there's a discussion point in that. But either which way, we're gonna probably wrap up soonish. So yeah, let's jump in to see what happens. Actually, I did want to show you earlier, which before I do that, was over here. So a lot of people ask about the Ableton setup, and just very briefly, there's very little in it. These Rhodes and piano parts, those are parts that I just sampled and played in while we were making music before. But apart from that, it's like you press play on my rig and nothing happens, whether I'm on stage or in the studio. the whole premise is that I can be creating whatever I feel. I like to say that with DJing, when you're choosing the record you're going to play, I have this chance to make the record that I want to play, and doing that in real time pretty quickly is a great kind of discipline for me, as well as a lot of fun, and it creates a creative muscle where if I have to produce music on deadline and maybe I'm not at 100% inspiration, then I can still do it. Like, I know that my bottom line is decent. So on a bad day I should be okay. On a great day, that's when the magic really starts to happen. So there's not a whole lot to show on this Ableton session. I run Machina as a plugin. It's slaving to Ableton, obviously, and then everything from Machina is getting spat out in separate channels over here, so I can run global effects. I have my Chaos pads coming back in, the mic I'm talking on, artillery, this kind of drum chop plugin, which I love using that. That's setting to every single channel pretty much. They can be turned on and off. But yeah, it's basically a blank slate where I can just come in and know what I'm getting as far as what's my instrument, where are my settings, and there's some limitations. It's like I have almost all my synths and stuff, synths and basses I have inside Machina. So kind of mid-flow, I can't switch out a sound really quickly, but at the same time, now and then I'll switch out sounds anyway if I'm in a production mode. But live, it's like, okay, these are my kind of my primary colors. What can I do to create new timbres with them? Question there: how do I change between tracks and set? Do you change machine groups or multiple machine instances, etc.? Yeah. So what I'm not on the computer at all, so showing you the screen doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'm basically I like to perform continuous flow, so I'm not stopping. I can, in that sense, I'll sample off Machina sometimes. I think I did that at the jam at the start of the session, sampling Machina into the second Chaos pad. Get a bit of perspective there. This Chaos pad on the left I used to sample everything going on in here. So I could demonstrate that actually. So I can sample that off into the Chaos pad on the left. I just grabbed 2 beats and I added a little stutter. So if I'm like performing, then this is what I would consider in the mix in a DJ sense, and then I can start building on top of that. And then I could be building a whole new music vibe, and the sample is here on the left Chaos pad. So I basically am emptying Machine, going to the next scene on Machina, and then I'm free to keep creating. So in that way, I can just keep it moving and not be kind of limited in that sense, if that makes sense. Oftentimes, I'm also on Ableton, I'm running acapellas, so I have a creative acapellas, and if I'm doing my solo show, let's grab something. There we go. Let's do. So the acapellas I like just to use as the kind of glue, especially performing solo, so it becomes like a remix set. So I'm just going to hit this one off and then build around it and see what happens.
Think about you.
right. I love a chaos pad moment. I mean, oh. I could spend all day with a chaos pad. Um, uh, how often do I practice and how long? I don't practice this as a flow. I've been honestly I've done all my practice on stage. Kind of doing this for a long time. The setup used to be a MPC 3000 and a Rhodes and a analog synth, analog vocoder and stuff. And over time, it's morphed into a digital setup. But the workflow has always been similar in that I got to a point with the MPC where I was actually doing a show in Budapest, and everything I programmed for the show, like I'd done everything. There was nothing left, and the audience wanted more. So I remember I tried to get out of it, tried to kind of fake tiredness or whatever, but the promoter kind of insisted, and I remember walking back on stage to this full house in Hungary, and they were so excited that they were going to get more music, and I'm walking on stage eyeballing the MPC thinking, oh my god, I have to like program a beat now like live, and it freaked me out. But I remember jumping on there, and the beat didn't come out at all how I'd imagined. Like I'd never programmed a beat live in front of an audience on a big ass sound system. And so I had to actually then create the music, like the harmonic structure and the bass line. I had to use that to make sense of the beat so it wouldn't sound whack. And that happened, and it got me to a point where it just made me really appreciate that kind of moment of, this is spontaneous, it's improvised, it's everything about jazz that I love, but it's in a whole different setting. And so from then on, I just wouldn't pre-program beats for gigs anymore, and it got to a point where I'm excited to approach a gig and find out what's going to happen. There's a massive amount of risk, especially using a lot of technology, but that's part of the fun too for me. And when it's all in flow, it's fantastic. When it's not, I got to work out how to juggle different pieces and play piano with one hand while I'm restarting the laptop with another, kind of thing. But then, it's interesting now that I have this set up at home, which I never used to do because I was on the road so much. But with no traveling, I'm here, and so I'm spending more time with it, and finding that kind of that flow, the live flow, is coming into my studio production, which is great because it makes a lot of sense for how I like to work. Do I set specific goals or intentions before each session? I love that. I don't specifically, consciously, but subconsciously I do. My goal and intention is always to have fun. And, I want to enjoy the process, and I want to make something that makes me feel how I feel. It's like how I felt in the club, like when I used to live in London, and we go and had dub plates, and you hear something played for the first time that had just been made in studio, and you get that feeling. And that's, for me, that's what I'm after all the time. And I've kind of formed a workflow where I'm quite confident that I can get to that point. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm definitely a big proponent of practicing. Like, I definitely have put in my 10,000 hours plus. I grew up playing the keyboards, the piano, and then all the time on stage is that's been a lot of practice time. And so I'm definitely a big advocate for that, and just encourage you all to keep on that and keep your streaks going. I saw someone had a 400-day streak or something before in the chat. That's great. And I don't know the Sanskrit word lila. I don't know. You have to hit me to that. but yeah, I wanted to probably pretty much wrap up on this and thank Melodics for having me along. It's really amazing work that they're doing. I'm tempted to get a electronic drum kit so I can start to learn that stuff, and get app heavy. But yeah, it's fantastic and it's great with the community. Appreciate everyone coming through. If you like the vibe of what I'm doing, please check out my Patreon. I'm doing like live streams there, video lessons, all sorts of stuff. I think there's a link on the info of the Twitch. Otherwise, it's patreon.com/mdcl. And Senior Positive, please make some new lessons for Melodics. What do you say, Sam? There's a whole lot of my lessons on there actually, and so there's probably more coming through. And man, thank you, I appreciate that. There's so much great content on the platform. So I'm glad you're enjoying my stuff. But yeah, enjoy yourselves out there. Keep safe. Stay inside if you're not, unless you're in New Zealand, because I think all of you guys can go outside around now, right? But yeah, appreciate you all, and it's been cool to share a bit of my world. I'm gonna jump off the stream and take a breather. Exactly, that childish play which gets kind of difficult as we grow up. That's a nice way to close out this. I mean, because it's, I know if someone's watching who's still at school or whatever it might be, this might sound a bit totally foreign, but it's true. As we get older, we have responsibilities and stresses and whatever it might be, and it can be hard to find time to create and to have fun. And I think the most important thing is to have fun. And whether that's 5 minutes or 5 hours, it's all valuable. And yeah, also speaking of my lessons, just saw Melodics chiming in on the chat. Check out Gazia. It's a super fun joint. Some little bassline lesson on there, and it's cool because it actually works in a different. We talked a lot about the minor pentatonic today, but it works in a melodic minor, which is a whole other scale. But you can have fun with that, and just if you're inspired, make some music from it. So yeah, I'm out. Thank you all. Take care, and hope to see you all soon on the internet or in person when that happens. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right. And yeah, once more, peace and love. Rest in peace, Ty. Peace.